Hi everyone, it's Erica. So I don't have OCD. I'm married to Nick, who has somatic OCD, and I've been making videos for the friends and family members slash loved ones in general of people who have OCD, trying to make them feel a little less alone because I know I felt really, well, sometimes I still do, feel pretty alone with regards to supporting Nick through his recovery. But this video today is probably applicable to the OCD sufferers as well, not just the families and friends of people with OCD. And I've had to remake this video literally 4 or 5 times now because it's a really complex and complicated, not straightforward topic at all. The topic is unsupportive family members. So the reason it's complicated is, every family is different, every situation is different. It's not black and white how this needs to be approached, and I don't want it to come across as me saying, this is how you deal with unsupportive family members, and then giving my opinion as if it's law, because that's not true. It's very, very complicated, and, how I would deal with a situation is different than how Nick might deal with a situation, and it's different than how you might deal with a situation. So, I have a few preface statements that I want to make before I get into the meat and potatoes of this video. So first off, remember that the person that you are thinking of as being unsupportive is probably not thinking of themselves as unsupportive. There's a really good chance that they are supporting you in the way that they think is helpful. And unfortunately, it might not be because you're watching this video and you might not be thinking like, oh, hey, this is helpful. So they're probably trying to help. They just aren't being helpful for what you need or would like. So if you do end up having a conversation with them about what you need from them, just bear that in mind. They're not bad people. More than likely, they want to see you get better. Or if you're, in my position where you're the supporter, they probably want to see the person that you love get better. Excuse me. So again, bear that in mind. Try to be gentle if you can when you're approaching this issue. My definition of unsupportive might be different than Nick's definition of unsupportive. It might be different than your definition of unsupportive. So again, this is why this video is so complicated, is because there's a lot of factors that go into it. And everybody's different. When you're dealing with dynamics between people, makes it even more complicated. So my definition of unsupportive is probably different than the next person's. And then the last preface statement I want to make, and I want to make this very, very, very clear. How Nick and I dealt with this is not necessarily how everybody should deal with it. Again, everybody and every situation is completely different. So please do not misconstrue what we did as my advice to you on what you should do. Because, again, it's not simple. So for our situation, another preface statement to this is Nick's family dynamics prior to his OCD kind of taking over his life were not stellar to begin with. There was a lot of family, and still is a lot of family conflict. Nick kind of describes it as this like, I'm right, you're wrong mentality that often happens in his family, and it's not always beneficial and it's usually pretty explosive. So we have to bear that in mind too. Like the family dynamics prior to all of this happening were not fantastic. So with regards to the OCD, how Nick interpreted a unsupportive family member was somebody who was acting like they knew how to fix it when, he's in this community now and he's getting all of these messages saying, this is what's helpful for OCD recovery, and it's kind of the stark opposite of what his family members are telling him. So that was not helpful for him. That was one part of, being unsupportive. Um, or, they were acting like it was an easy fix. I think part of this probably had to do with sometimes in society we can normalize OCD, saying, oh, I need to have my desk organized a certain way. I'm really OCD about it. People not really understanding that the D stands for disorder, and it's a lot more complex than just having things organized a certain way. So I think that probably played a role in the idea like this is supposed to be an easy fix. Like I remember there were moments where it was almost like they were saying, what's wrong with him? What's wrong with him? And it's what's wrong is he has OCD. And I don't want to. I'm going to interrupt myself for a second. I don't want to come across as I was perfect at dealing with this either, because there were definitely moments where I was not being the supportive wife that Nick would have liked for me to be. I was not perfect at all through any of this by any means. It was such a big learning process. And I'm going to get to the point later where, things that I had to do for myself so that I could be more supportive for Nick. So there were points where I was like, what is wrong? Like, I don't understand. Why is this so hard for him? He was playing video games constantly, like sometimes more than 24 hours he was playing video games. And so I felt very ignored, and I'm like, what is wrong with him? Why can't he just be the husband that I married? And it's not that you have to understand OCD in order to understand like why they can't just snap out of it. So anyways, there was this kind of what's wrong with you mentality of unsupportive family members. So it's not easy for somebody to just kind of snap out of or just deal with. It's a lot harder and more complex than that. So I had to go through my own reckoning with that. And I think, I don't know if because I haven't really spoken to them a whole lot about it. I don't know if these family members have kind of come to that reckoning or not, but, that was something that we did have to deal with, was this, like, it should be easy. Like, it's, what's wrong with you? Why can't you just do this? One family member did go so far as to say that Nick was making all of this up for attention, including him not wanting to live anymore. Like saying that was something, he was just attention seeking for that. And that really rubbed me the wrong way, because I was the one here dealing with it. So not only did Nick get really upset about that, and he didn't handle that well, he didn't handle most of the family conflicts well, and I'll get to that again later, but that person saying that this was all for attention not only devalued what he was going through, but it also, for me, who was having to deal with it and go through it with him, it kind of devalued what I was having to deal with as well. So that was really frustrating to hear. And there was conflict not just with Nick and that family member, but also myself. So, that was that was not a fun thing to go through. But anyways, before I get to the part of how we dealt with everything, I'm going to go through some tips that might, and this is a big might, be helpful. So I'm going to start with tips for OCD sufferers, and some of it I might have already touched on, but I'm going to reiterate just for sake of the argument. So for OCD sufferers, anger is probably not going to help. It is more than likely just going to fuel irrationalities. The number of times that I saw Nick get angry about a family member not understanding or not being supportive or, just simplifying things for him. The number of times that I saw him get angry was a lot, but it would also fuel irrational thinking in him. So, it would be frustrating for me having to deal with the anger, but then he would also have all of these irrationalities that he would just spew out, that I also felt like I had to talk him out of. Now, knowing that, knowing what I know, talking him out of it is his own job, which I've said in, other videos. He needs to learn how to do this for himself. But the anger ultimately just kind of fueled the irrationalities. So if you're starting to feel angry with somebody about them not understanding or being unsupportive, my recommendation, and I'm not saying that this is easy, but to take like at least 5 minutes to try to calm down before you approach this topic, so that you're not approaching the conversation with them with a bunch of irrationalities. And, if you get angry with someone, typically they're going to get defensive back. So that conversation is probably not going to be too productive. So I would say take some time to try to calm yourself down a little bit first before you approach whatever it is that you're getting frustrated about. My other suggestion would be try to come from a place of education and educating them on what's going on with you and what you're finding is helpful for recovery, instead of saying you're wrong. This is, again, something that Nick's family does a lot of. You're wrong, I'm right. So Nick, and he's getting better at it, but 30 years of that approach. So that's how he was going about dealing with these family members, is you're wrong, I'm right. And, to a certain extent, he was right, because it is his disorder and his recovery, and he's the one doing all the research on this. But coming at it from a defensive standpoint, instead of educating them and being kind about it and being, supportive in their own learning too. I personally see that going a lot farther in trying to get somebody to understand what's going on and how they can be helpful. So educating them on OCD and the recovery process is going to be really important. Being calm about it is going to be really important, but also educating them on what you need from them. Now, I would say make sure that what you're educating them on for what you need from them, make sure that you're actually watching and educating yourself on what's going to be helpful long term. So I know that this is an example. Reassurance. Nick, early on in his recovery, might have come to me and said, I need reassurance from you, or, I just need you to say everything's going to be okay, which, if you watched the last video I made on reassurance, long term is not helpful. So if you're going to be educating them on what you need from them, I would make sure that that is very crystal clear in alignment with what you need for long-term recovery. Because if Nick had come to me and said, this is helpful for my recovery, I need you to reassure me all the time, I probably would have ended up doing that, and that wouldn't have been helpful. So make sure that what you're educating them on is going to be in alignment with what you need long-term. And try to kindly educate them as well on what they're doing that isn't helpful and what they can do to replace that. So it kind of comes along with that, educating them on what you need. But specifically saying it's not helpful when you do this. It's not helpful, I think if Nick, and I don't know if this would have been helpful or not in his situation, but I don't recall a time when he calmly educated his family members on saying, it's not helpful when you say that medications are going to fix everything for me. I don't know how that conversation would have gone. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't have a little crystal, ball, but something along those lines of him educating them, saying, when you do this, it's not helpful. I would prefer it if you approached it this way. It might have been beneficial, but again, I don't know that because that wasn't a topic up for discussion with him and them. So those are some tips that I have for OCD sufferers. They may or may not be helpful. It also depends on how open the person that you're talking to is to receiving the information that you're giving them. And if they're not open to changing their perspective or their mind, then, that sucks. But logic, like the actual rational statement is behind this is they don't need to be. People can be as open-minded or as closed-minded as they want, and that's the unfortunate truth of it. So at the end of the day, for an OCD sufferer to go through their recovery, they need one person to go through that, and that's themselves. Because I keep saying, a support system is, helpful. It's definitely, I think it could potentially make you feel a little bit less alone. I know that Nick felt really alone when, he was going through this because his family wasn't the most supportive. But at the end of the day, Nick is the one that gets himself through his recovery. Not me, not, his friends. It's Nick. It's just nice to have a support system. So that doesn't necessarily make you feel any less alone, but that is the truth of the matter. Okay, so for family members, tips for family members, you can also try to educate other family members. You could show them some of the videos from this channel. When it comes to educating family members, I know from personal experience that didn't always go over very well. Maybe my approach was not helpful, but I did try a couple of times reaching out to some of the family members saying, when you talk to him this way, it doesn't help. It makes things worse. And that was not met with an open mind. That was met more so along the lines of like, why are you telling us how to speak to our own family member? So again, it depends on how open the other person is to having those kinds of conversations, but you can try to educate that family member on what's helpful, what's not, how their recovery process goes, etc. Sometimes showing them these videos is really helpful. Again, trying not to get angry. I didn't always handle that very well. When the family member that said he was making this up for attention, I lost it. I'm not going to lie. I lost it because, when somebody is in that dark of a place, saying that they're making it up for attention it broke my heart. I'm not going to lie. Like it really broke my heart to hear that a family member said that to him. So try not to get angry. It's going to be really hard. Again, I lost it. So be gentle with yourself if you can't. Sorry, I'm a little bit upset still by it, but try not to get angry. If you need to take 5 minutes before you say something, then take 5 minutes. If you need to take a week, take a week. If you need to take a couple weeks, take a couple weeks. But coming from a place of anger just escalates the situation. I know it did for us, definitely. So try to stay calm if you can, and stay open-minded. So the open-mindedness part is probably the biggest thing I can say when trying to help the recovery process. So I know that Nick and I did a video on tough love, and tough love is super important in keeping them accountable. But open-mindedness when coming from a support standpoint is going to probably be the biggest thing to make them feel supported. So, when Nick is telling me I can't stop thinking about my blinking, if I'm not open-minded to that, he's going to feel even more isolated because he's like, okay, well, this is a weird thing and this isn't normal, and Erica's judging me for that. So staying open-minded, even if it's things that you think are weird or you've never heard of before, staying open-minded is going to be the biggest key to all of this. And being open-minded, like if I didn't know anything about OCD, I really didn't know anything about the treatment of OCD, medications. I mean, I'm a chiropractor. I don't know a whole lot about medications because we don't prescribe them. So, I didn't know a whole lot about the process, so I had to be open-minded about the process completely. My natural go-to is to say everything's going to be okay, but that's not helpful in this process. So I had to be open-minded to the fact that me being supportive and saying it's going to be okay might not be the supportive thing that he needs me to do. So being open-minded to that is super, super important. So now I'm going to talk about what we did in this situation when dealing with unsupportive family members. Again, just because we did this does not make it the right situation for you. So Nick did actually decide to end up not speaking to them for a few months. This is not for everyone. I'm going to say that like 10 times. It's not for everyone. It's not for everyone. Because this can also be really isolating as well. You know, if you're finding that your family is not being supportive, that can be pretty isolating, but stopping speaking to them is also isolating. So, you know, for Nick in that situation, it was the best decision for him because he was not at a point where he could handle the additional stress of the conflict that was going on. You know, he has since spoken to them and he still continues to speak to them, but he's also at a place in his recovery where he's not going to be, well, he might sometimes, but at least not as much, be adding to that conflict and having that conflict escalate. And he's better at being non-reactive to the things that he finds are not helpful or supportive. So if somebody says to him, "Hey, have you tried these meds?" and he's like, "Meds are not gonna, get to the underlying issue here. They might help take the edge off for him, but he doesn't feel like they're gonna be long-term supportive. So, or a long-term fix for him. So if somebody says that to him, he now has the tools in place where he's not going to get upset about somebody pushing that on him. So he had to do his own personal work before he felt like it was going to be productive having those conversations with them or having conversations in general with them. So again, it's not for everyone. He needed to do some work before he felt like he could have a decent relationship with these people. So it just gave him the mental space that he needed also to focus on his recovery. So, if you're spending 90%, and this was not what was happening with him, he wasn't spending 90% of his day fighting with them, but if you're spending 90% of your day fighting with people about what's going on, that leaves 10% of your day to actually focus on recovery. And that's not necessarily helpful. So it did give Nick the time and the space that he needed to get him through the first hump of his recovery. Again, this is not necessarily for everyone. I don't want people just to watch this video and think, I need to stop talking to my unsupportive family members. That's not what I'm saying at all. Not at all. I do not have a black and white blanket statement solution for unsupportive family members. I don't. Every situation, again, is different. I don't know you. I don't know your family. I don't know your circumstances. So the person who ultimately is going to come up with the solution to this is you. Or if you're a supportive family member, speaking with the OCD sufferer and maybe coming up with a game plan, maybe you just minimize the conversations that you have with this person, or you steer clear of the topic of OCD. So, the space did help him. This was just for his situation, though. So he can deal with the conflict better if it comes up. Again, this is not black and white. This is not simple. When you're dealing with family members, things can be very touchy. And again, there's no easy solution to any of it. I wish that this was a magical video where I could tell you, this is what you do, and that's simple, but it's not. So I hope that it did help at least a little bit, clarifying some stuff. But just remember to try to be open-minded if you're the family member. Try to be as open-minded as possible. That is going to be the biggest thing to help make the OCD sufferer feel supported through all of this, because they probably don't. A lot of the time they don't know what to do. They don't know what's going on. Nick had no idea why he couldn't stop thinking about his blinking. So be open-minded. Be open-minded to the recovery process. Be open-minded to their symptoms as best you can. That is truly the best advice that I can give for this video, is to remain open-minded. But yeah, if you guys have any questions or comments or concerns, you can drop them in the comments below. We'll try to get back to you. I'm sorry that this is not a simple solution, but good luck to everybody if you are feeling a little bit alone in dealing with some unsupportive family members. It's not easy. It's really frustrating. I can tell you that it was probably one of the more frustrating things that we did have to deal with. But, he's talking to them again, and they're communicating better, ultimately. So Nick had some learning to do, and from his end of the relationship, it was really helpful for him to take that space, but it's not for everybody. So have a good day, guys. Thanks for listening.